she is an expert on both developmental, human rights, and agricultural issues. She has received the title of Most Valuable Thinker by The Nation magazine. Under her leadership, the Institute has unveiled the impacts of land grabbing in the developing world, revealing a disturbing pattern and a lack of transparency, fairness, and accountability. Now, one more thing I'd like to add is, as we're talking about the changing dynamics, we often talk about how in the last 10, last 15 years, majority of the organizations that we're talking about Palestine and the cause were predominantly Palestinian organizations. So this is a pretty significant shift that we have organizations and other institutes that are joining us, previously like with MLFA, who are taking part in this initiative for liberation and justice for Palestine. So please join me in welcoming Anuradha Patel.
Assalamu alaikum. Very honored to be here. As I walked into the hotel, I found my eyes tearing up. I'm just deeply humbled to be also in the company of these incredible brothers and sisters. My name is Anuradha Patel. I'm here from the Oakland Institute where I work on land rights. Some might say I'm a human rights activist who works on human rights issues around the globe, from my country, India, to Sri Lanka, to Tanzania, to Kenya, to Palestine. I'm very aware that for many in this room it is virtually impossible to return or travel to your motherland, as Ahmed once gently pointed out to me. I have had the privilege of traveling to West Bank several times and witnessed firsthand the everyday struggles and dispossession of Palestinian communities under the Israeli occupation. Privilege brings responsibility, and this is why I am here. A resident of the village of Nabi Saleh, Bassem Tamimi, once said to me, "You cannot be free without my freedom." This is not about solidarity. It is your responsibility and your duty to join my struggle. This is why I, as Anuradha, or the Executive Director of the Oakland Institute, am here at the American Muslims for Palestine. Palestine is in the US. Yes, it is in the US because the ugly reality of the two separate racist legal systems that govern West Bank cannot be hidden any longer. With the Israeli secular subject to Israeli civilian and criminal legal system, and the Palestinians under the Israeli military law, which includes Palestinian children. Palestine is in the United States because every year Israel prosecutes between 500 and 700 Palestinian children in military courts. No Israeli child comes into contact with military court system. I have traveled to Nabi Saleh to learn about the weekly non-violent marches that are organized by the villagers since 2009 to protest the occupation. My journey from Jenin to Nabi Saleh was made longer by the blockades. The signs of the village were missing letters on the hard-to-find sign for the village, which is otherwise internationally renowned for its resistance, was an attempt to obliterate another Palestinian village, its Palestinian residents, and the Palestinian identity itself. Homes were fenced with garlands of used gas canisters, a familiar feature of daily life under occupation. Yes, Palestine is in the US because this ugly reality cannot be hidden by Israeli government any longer. The nearby settlement Halam Alish was established in 1976 on lands belonging to the village of Nabi Saleh. Halamish continued to expand with a fence built in 2008 preventing villagers access to their own land. And an Israeli court ruled to dismantle the fence. However, Halamish settlers illegally annexed more land and took over Nabi Saleh's natural spring. As I sat in the courtyard of a Palestinian home, I learned it was in Area C. It was built with permission in 1964. But demolition orders were hanging over the heads of the family since 2010. The order being the price paid by the Palestinian family for resisting occupation. When I traveled, I learned that a quarter of the nearly 775,000 registered refugees in the West Bank live in 19 refugee camps. I visited the Ida refugee camp established in 1950. UNRWA leased the land from the government of Jordan for displaced villagers from 27 villages in Western Jerusalem and Western Hebron in 1948. Now, despite the fact that many of the homes that the people were displaced from are merely few kilometers away, it is illegal and virtually impossible for the residents of Ida camp to even visit their villages. The entrance of the camp is marked by the long key of return, the symbol of Palestinian refugees' rights as guaranteed by the UN resolution number 94, passed by the UN General Assembly in December of 48 and endorsed by both the United Kingdom and the United States. 71 years after the camp was established, the refugees still await their right of return to be honored. This is why Palestine is in the United States. Today, Palestine is in the United States, it's in the Congress. It is in the Congress because thousands of people have written letters and called, including myself, asking for our tax dollars not to be fueling this apartheid state and its occupation of Palestine. Today, Palestine is in our hearts and minds. It is in the corporate boardrooms where corporations that have called for dismantling of white supremacy are being held accountable. Today, Palestine is in our hearts and minds because Israel realizes that the dirty secret is out. It is the policies of the Israeli government that have created an apartheid state that is responsible for people joining the struggle for Palestinian liberation. Israel continues to attack leading human rights organizations in Palestine. It is threatening human rights defenders because it knows that the small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck her head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys. This is the sage, keep dropping keys all night long for the beautiful rowdy prisoners. And I'll tell you why Palestine is in corporate boardrooms like Ben & Jerry's. I'll tell you why Palestine is in the minds of those who are in the Congress. I share this little poem that I heard from a small boy at the Ida refugee camp. I will become a kite and fly over the wall, said the boy. If you become a kite and fly over the wall, said his mother, then I will become a clever little child, the best in the neighborhood at kite flying. And I will tie ribbons to you and fly you high above the wall all the way to Jerusalem. Or maybe I'll become a mountain so that I can be bigger than the wall and see over it, said the boy. If you become the mountain and become bigger than the wall, said his mother, I will become a farmer and plant olive trees and tend to you and live from the olives you bear. Palestine is in our minds and hearts because of each one of you. The resistance which cannot be killed, which cannot be suppressed. This is a liberation struggle. And you look at the history, when people unite for liberation, including my own country, India, people are never defeated. It is the immorality and the unethical occupation that comes to an end, and this is why Palestine is in our minds and hearts. Thank you for having me.